Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the seminar series, Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. And today's lesson number 5 is Iskcon branch. And again, we'll just say that kirtan was the kirtan before the class. And we can just say together, Om Vishnupadaya Krishnasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pascharya Tarane Shiramoha Ki Jai. Okay. It's Iskcon branch. And there's the tree, another botanical fact and metaphor. In the plaque on the fence that's, as we look at it, to the left of the tree, now there's a fence. And on the fence is a plaque. And it says, this is the Hare Krishna, this is the place where His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada started the Hare Krishna movement. And he's standing under a Dutch elm tree, which is, it says on the plaque, this is one of the finest collections of Dutch elms in America. So they're promoting the fact that the Hare Krishna movement gave birth in New York City, took birth in New York City, and we have these beautiful trees. And now the tree is so much bigger, it's like 50 years later, 60 years later. And you can't even see anything in the background there. There's something. It's all changed. East Village, Greenwich Village. Okay, that's slide 1. Shocking as it was, the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi in January 1948 only intensified Srila Prabhupada's desire to spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya on the order of his Guru Maharaj. Unable to engage the Mahatma during his life, Abhay would now try to engage him after his death. Here is an excerpt from a proposal Prabhupada first made to the Indian government. His spiritual vision of how to properly honor Gandhi. He called it, quote, the Gita Nagari. So somehow or other, when we were researching this first volume of the Lilamrita, Lifetime in Preparation, I was the one who found this essay in the files that were sent to us from what became the Bhaktivedanta archives. And I was at Gita Nagari, because a lot of the volumes, well, they were all written actually at Gita Nagari in Pennsylvania. And so we were going through all this stuff that we'd received, and I came across this essay, the Gita Nagari, or the Interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita, it was called. And in this essay, Prabhupada starts talking about a community that, and I didn't know the context. And the context is that after Gandhi was assassinated, the Indian government was trying to figure out how to properly honor him. So Prabhupada had an idea. Okay, I wanted to engage Gandhi during his life in preaching Gita as it is. Then he was shot. So, but everybody still knows and loves Gandhi. So I'm going to propose something. So here's an excerpt from the proposal that Prabhupada wrote. Here we go. Where's the mic? Okay, Vishwambara, why don't you just read this?
The Gita Nagari will properly utilize the huge resources of Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Fund. Gandhi's memory can be well preserved by his exemplary activities and not by simply constructions of huge buildings or dead stone statues.
Dead stone statues. More. Here you go.
Mahatma Gandhi was saintly reformer and his memorial fund may be utilized for the purpose of converting degraded persons into saintly order.
So Prabhupada is telling them, look, if you want to honor Gandhi, let's make a community based on the teachings of the Gita, which was Gandhi's book, a book of inspiration. He's using Gandhi's name to try to, this was the first face, if you will, or name that Prabhupada gave to his mission, the Gita Nagari, the village where the Bhagavad Gita is sung and lived. Prabhupada urged the fund's director to, quote, keep in motion Gandhi's spiritual movements, plural. What you're going to see in this lesson is how there were different aspects, or Prabhupada called them movements, or waves, to Gandhi's, his cause. And then we're going to see how Prabhupada adopted that to Iskcon later. So here's the four aspects that Prabhupada identifies as aspects of Gandhi's movement. Namely, his prayerful recitation of sacred sounds. Prabhupada Gandhi was famous for chanting sacred chants at his prayer meetings. His restoration of deities to temples. His recognition of everyone as a Harijan, a person of God. And his ideal of a spiritually harmonious society. Quote, the above fourfold Gandhi movements, he wrote, if done in an organized, scientific way, supported by all the authentic scriptures of all religions, will bring in that tranquility of peace and a respite from all harshness and bitterness of the present world, which we have longed for till now. Unquote. This is all made in like 48, 49. Fresh from independence, however, India's leaders longed only to be, quote, modern, and were uninterested in Prabhupada's spiritual proposals. No, they didn't respond. Well, they actually did. They said, thank you very much, but that was it. They didn't. They were soliciting proposals. How should we honor Mahatma Gandhi? And so this is Prabhupada's spiritual, but they just, instead there's the dead stone statues where Prabhupada and elsewhere, he said, where pigeons pass stool. It's, what's the use? Fresh from, undaunted, Prabhupada kept on preaching. And in 1952, he found his first receptive audience among medical students in the northern Indian town of Jhansi. One of the students was able to connect him with a pious estate executor who let him use the estate's property and buildings to teach and to reframe his mission as, quote, the League of Devotees. Encouraged by the students' interest in his classes, on May 16, 1953, Prabhupada held a grand opening for the League. So this is a painting of that by the BBT artists, a grand opening for the League, announcing its spiritual purposes in a prospectus he handed out to the guests in attendance. The League's first aim foreshadowed Iskcon's first aim. You know how you see the articles of incorporation, the purposes of Iskcon. So this is like a first draft of that. Okay, the mic is now.
To propagate spiritual knowledge systematically, we're checking the imbalance of life to the whole race of India and the world over, with a view to educate the people in general in the techniques of spiritual life as the basis for balanced psychic and biological developments of the human race, and thereby achieve real unity and peace of the contending elements of the present world.
Pretty elaborate. It's more elaborate than what you read in the 7 purposes of Iskcon, because those 7 purposes they had to be very succinct and brief for Iskcon's incorporation papers. But in this, you get a broader field of what Prabhupada intends for his mission. And there's another document I'm going to refer to later that I think everyone should look at also, besides the 7 purposes of Iskcon. What's coming up? Around the same time, Prabhupada ran an ad in Jhansi's newspaper. This is a lot ad. Listen to this.
Wanted candidates from any nationality to qualify themselves as real Brahmins for preaching the teachings of Bhagavad Gita for all practical purposes throughout the whole world. The serving candidates will be provided with free boarding and lodging. Apply A.C. Bhaktivedanta, founder and secretary of the League of Devotees.
And there you see, there's actually something manifest in 3 dimensions. There's buildings. This estate executor, it was called the Radha Memorial. And this fellow had built this whole estate as a memorial to his wife, named Radha. It wasn't about Radharani, it was about his wife. And so, but after the man passed away, it was lying vacant for years and years. So when Prabhupada came to Jhansi, this fellow named Prabhakar Mishra, Sanskritist, who by the way became Prabhupada's first disciple, Acharya Prabhakar, introduced Prabhupada, or Bhaktivedanta Prabhu as he was known then, to the estate executor. And so, because the executor, he liked sadhus, so Prabhakar Mishra thought that, yeah, maybe this person will let Prabhu use it for his preaching base. And so sure enough, the guy did. And so, and then Prabhupada had somebody, letter that on the wall. So here's Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, I never thought small, right? There he is, all alone in Jhansi. There's an Ayurvedic medical college there, right, in Jhansi. So they're kind of interested, but they're students and not really, they're just sort of curious about this sadhu who knows a lot about Veda and Ayurveda and so many things. So Prabhupada runs a wanted. Now years later, when Hare Prabhu was serving Prabhupada in Vrindavan, he came across in a trunk in Prabhupada's rooms with some of these papers from the League of Devotees. So Hare we didn't know anything about the League of Devotees. This came out later. So Hare brings one of the papers to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, what is this? You had a movement in India before you came to the West? League of Devotees? Who was in this? And Prabhupada just chuckled and said, oh, that was just me. Prabhupada says, founder and secretary of the League of Devotees. It was a one-man band, But he was soliciting recruits to become spiritual revolutionaries to preach all over the world. That's our Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. Okay, so here's Prabhupada's intention. The peace that the League of Nations had failed to bring after World War I, and that the United Nations would also fail to deliver after World War II, the League of Devotees would now bring through systematic spiritual education. The events that would compel Prabhupada to eventually set aside the League, leave his family, accept the renounced order of life, and finally journey alone to the West, have been well documented in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. What concerns us here is how Prabhupada finally established his mission as Iskcon, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, fulfilling its purposes in distinct phases. So the League of Devotees was kind of like the beta version of Iskcon, the dry run, the practice for it didn't pan out, and but I think, yeah, we'll see why later. Okay, so the next part of the narrative is, I call it a branch of Lord Chaitanya's movement. During his first year in the West, the Lord revealed to Prabhupada he would have to start a fresh branch of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Indeed, in his commentary to the Sri Chaitanya Chaitamrita Adi Lila 12.73, Prabhupada identifies Iskcon as a, quote, branch of the Bhakti Kalpataru, Lord Chaitanya's desire tree of devotional service. There's a rather far out picture of Lord Chaitanya. He's the trunk, he's the gardener watering the tree. He's trying to distribute all the fruits, but he says, although he says he can't do it all himself, so I need help. Right? So please help me. He's trying to give us the credit for helping him spread it all over the world, all over the universe. Though but a branch, Prabhupada's mission carries the spiritual power to transplant, quote, the tree of love of Godhead worldwide. Prabhupada memorably begged for that empowerment in the next to last verse of the poem he wrote the day he landed in America. Quote, "O Lord, I am just like a puppet in your hands. So if you have brought me here to dance, then make me dance, O Lord, make me dance as you like." Okay. Famous early photo. Anybody know when Prabhupada is there? No, it is 26 Second Avenue, but there's no garden there. There's a courtyard in back of the storefront, between the storefront and the apartment where Prabhupada lived up in 2C. There's a courtyard, so Prabhupada is obviously posing there, and there was a bird house and a bird bath. And Prabhupada in very simple attire there. Okay, on July 13th, 1966, the same educational purpose Prabhupada had announced 13 years earlier for the League of Devotees, he now formalized as his first purpose in Iskcon's incorporation papers. Okay, so here's the first, we're just going to look at that. I think, yeah, here's the first purpose, because it pretty much, it sets the tone for all the other purposes. Okay?
To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life, in order to check the imbalance of values in life, and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. 6
more purposes followed, all reflecting the same educational mood and mission. Yeah, it's an educational society we're living in. It's the purpose of Iskcon is education. So, now, if you do have access to the Bhaktivedanta database, I heartily encourage you. This is July 13th, but if you look 6 days earlier on legal documents, you'll see a document called Constitution of Association. And if you go in there, you see a much more elaborate version of those purposes and a much broader vision of Iskcon. This is just the incorporation papers. I mean, it does capture, in one sense, the essence, but we need to see the breadth also, as well as the depth of Prabhupada's Iskcon. So, yeah. Are you going into the database now, Prabhu? I'm just curious. Are you checking it out? No? Okay. Yeah, do that. You'll actually get a very expansive view of Iskcon.
2 days ago, 10th of July?
Hmm?
6 days. 6 days.
I think it's dated July 7th, that constitute, 6 days earlier, July 7th. Now in 1976, 10 years later, 10 years after he had incorporated Iskcon, Prabhupada was back in New York City to celebrate Radhadesh. The first New York Radhadesh wasn't until 76. The temple's first chariot parade, reflecting on its society's global expansion in such a short time, Prabhupada compared Iskcon to Radhadesh, the Boer's Lord Incarnation. As Lord Varaha had appeared from the nostril of Lord Brahma, this is quite a unique comparison. The nostril of Lord Brahma then quickly assumed a cosmic form. So Iskcon had appeared in a tiny storefront, a little hole in the wall on New York's Lower East Side, and quickly covered the earth. It had done so because Prabhupada had been utterly and absolutely surrendered to Krishna's plan, whose phases he had been contemplating since the 1940s. So now what we're going to do for the rest of the lesson is look at the phases of Prabhupada's movement that he unfolded over time. And we're going to connect them to his earlier, before he came to the West, Prabhupada discussed these phases, especially in BTG pieces he was writing in the 50s. And then we're going to see how those phases manifested in Iskcon, years later. And I gave names to the phases, so I call the first phase Holy Names and Holy Books. In a 1956 Back to Godhead article highlighting the importance of absorption in sacred sound, Prabhupada wrote, "Leaders and politicians may take lessons from the life of Mahatma Gandhi." He's still beating the Gandhi drum. He's still trying to connect, because, Gandhi's fame and death increased even more. May take lessons from the life of Mahatma Gandhi in respect of his daily evening prayer meetings and regular recitation of Bhagavad Gita. Reciting the Gita makes one able to get rid of the demoniac way of life and gradually rise up to the plane of pure devotional life of the gods. Okay, so let's see, here we go. So how did this manifest in Iskcon? Holy names and holy books. Okay. Launching Iskcon in 1966, Prabhupada was the exemplar of ecstatic devotion. Brows knit. There's, see Prabhupada chanting there. Brows knit. Eyes slit in concentration. Swamiji led his first followers in chanting Hare Krsna for hours together. Inside the storefront that first summer, then outside in nearby parks that fall. Those publicized outings were an historic marker in Prabhupada's public outreach, which he continued to expand globally through his followers. Back at the storefront, he would hold Bhagavad Gita classes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening. Now the holy books, those are the books he brought were from India, but he was holding Gita classes, the ABC, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening. Since Prabhupada had not finished translating his Bhagavad Gita as it is, he used the version of a famous impersonalist, whose commentary Prabhupada exposed as misleading speculation. He was using Dr. Radhakrishna's Gita, And Prabhupada said, yeah, the translations are 90% accurate, but the purports are all rubbish. So Prabhupada was he was speaking his purport, he was telling them in the classes what the verses meant. And at the same time, he was working on his own as-it-is translation. Not till late 1968 would his as-it-is edition appear, especially for his followers. Till that time, Prabhupada himself was the main focus. The holy names and holy books issuing from one holy man. To impress upon his followers their responsibility to continue spreading Krishna's teachings after he was gone, Prabhupada had them start an American edition of Back to Godhead. Yeah. It was, the technology was mimeograph. It's kind of like the Stone Age, right? Just by, I don't know how to describe it, but it was hand crank mimeograph machine. They were rolling, they were producing the pages, and the devotees would collate the pages because they wanted to do something for Swami. So Prabhupada, oh, you want to do something? Well, why don't you restart Back to Godhead? I started this in 44, and then it just didn't have time to work on it when he was doing the books, translating the Bhagavatam. So why don't you restart an American version of Back to Godhead? So there's the first, is it the first? Yeah, I think, or number 7. Anyway, it's in the first year. You can see it's got the psychedelic flavor of his first followers, the circles. And then by a couple of years later, October '69, it's a full color magazine. They learned quickly how to do it. Okay. To impress upon his followers their responsibility to continue spreading Krishna's teachings after he was gone, Prabhupada had them start an American edition of Back to Godhead. Rolling off old mimeograph machines at first, by the end of the decade, BTG had become a colorful magazine, whose copies Iskcon devotees would offer people gathered round their street chanting parties. These were the infant days of a literature distribution that would become a hallmark of Prabhupada's. Yeah, when I joined in July 70, that's what was going on. And it was the biggest temple in the movement at the time. I mean, 50 devotees, crammed into this, as I said, former funeral parlor. And it was Iskcon Press was there, and all the artists were there, and there was even one older fellow, who was the first, I guess, Radhadesh, you might say, in the movement, Ushik, the late Ushik Prabhu. And we would go out to Boston Common and Cambridge Common in shifts. So all day we were going out. And then at night we'd go to the theater district. And in the theater district there was a musical playing called Hare, which is all about the counterculture. And the grand finale of Hare was they were chanting Hare Krishna on stage. Because Hare Krishna was called a hippie religion in the Haight-Ashbury. Because so many hippies were going to Prabhupada's free lunch. So the grand finale was chanting Hare Krishna, so then the people would file out of the theater, and then they'd be greeted by us, a chanting party, chanting Hare Krishna. So they thought maybe this was still part of the play or something. So they'd all start chanting and dancing with us. It was fun. Okay, so, all right, so phase 1 is holy names and holy books. Prabhupada talked about that in BTG in the 50s, and then it manifested as BTG in the 60s. Yeah, the biggest distributor around our chanting party was Giriraj Brahmachari.
Wow.
We chant for 20 minutes or a half hour, and then somebody would step out and address the crowd, because this is the height of the anti-war movement and women's liberation and black liberation, and so there's so much going on in these public spaces. And then we'd step out and we would chant and or speak. And then while somebody was addressing the crowd, then some brave devotees would step away from the chanting party with, a stack of BTGs in one arm and then a conch in the other for the donations. People were giving us, nickels and dimes, and it was this. And by the end of the day, sometimes Giriraj would come back with, he had distributed 30 BTGs. Wow, Prabhu, we were empowered. And $30, how did you get bills from these people? Well, if you know Giriraj Maharaj, he's sweet as pie, right? And he was empowered. But that's, and meanwhile, the Krishna books were piling up. We didn't have to distribute books or Gita. We thought that was too much. But magazines was small enough for us to consider distributing. All right. So, all right. Let's go to phase 2. Temples and deities, I call them. So holy names and holy books, and then temples and deities. In the above mentioned 1956 BTG article, Prabhupada cited Gandhi's, quote, temple entry movement to show the crucial role temples play in a spiritual revolution. Though Gandhi was known as a, quote, politician among saints, Prabhupada praised him for trying to restore the deity forms of Krishna to temples desecrated by Hindu-Muslim violence. Unfortunately, Prabhupada wrote, the temples have become, quote, rendezvous of demoniac dance. So many plague spots for preaching atheism, unquote. Now, when I came across that quote, I didn't know what to make of it. And for years, presenting this seminar, this particular lesson in the series, I had to confess to the devotees I didn't know what Prabhupada meant by rendezvous of demoniac dance. I mean, this is in the 50s, right? And in the 50s in America, rock and roll had come in. Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, right? So, but I couldn't imagine that in India in the 50s, that people were boogieing in the temples in India. No, this couldn't be. So I didn't know, I confessed, I didn't know what's going on. So, but then when I was in Bangalore South, there's many temples in Bangalore, not just the Hare Krsna hill, but there is many temples in Bangalore. So in Bangalore South, when I confessed my bafflement at that phrase, a South Indian, devotee said, Prabhu, what Prabhupada means is that by the 50s, in the temples, there were sahajyas doing their grotesque, old men dressed as gopis, doing their grotesque, gopi bhav, please turn it on, gopi bhav dances. I said, oh, thank you very much. Guys, he see Radha gopi bhav. So that's what Prabhupada means by rendezvous of the maniac dance. The temples are being spoiled, by people. They're not centers of education. They should be centers of education. We're going to look at that too. And I'll just keep going. So, but they weren't being properly. The deities were just being shown, for money, and they were dirty, and it was horrible. Hence, Prabhupada's proposal to regenerate the temples as centers of spiritual education. So that's what these temples are for, where we become enlightened and where we enlighten others. During Iskcon's launch a decade later, so now again back in the 60s, As Prabhupada's raw recruits became practiced to chant Hare Krishna and hear Bhagavad Gita, worshipable images, so temples and deities, so worshipable images often appeared first as devotional paintings in low-rent storefronts. That's why the first centers were storefronts, because the rent was cheap. Then as imported sacred statues who came to bless former churches. So then as more people joined and more Lakshmi flowed into the movement, then people started buying temples. And here you have a castle. Well, that was much later, but people started buying, devotees started buying churches. Like the LA temple, anybody ever been to LA? Yeah, it's a former Methodist church. Or Kalachandji's in Dallas, former Baptist church. Montreal, out of the road, former Catholic church. Vancouver, yeah. Okay, yeah, so, okay. Let's see here. Surprisingly, homemade, quote unquote, forms appeared right away. It wasn't, they didn't have to, they were in the storefront at 518 Frederick Street, but these forms appeared right away in the first San Francisco temple, storefront. A storefront in the heart of America's counterculture. Prabhupada asked a skilled newcomer to carve deities. The devotees are getting their knowing smiles on their faces, Malati told the story here?
Yes.
Okay. Shamsundar did here?
No, she.
No, very good. Prabhupada asked a skilled newcomer to carve deities modeled after figurines spotted in an import store. Never mind that the carver's wife had shoplifted the figures. We didn't call it shoplifting in those days. We called it liberating the merchandise from the capitalist pigs. It was our sacred duty to do that. So yeah, Malati, or Melanie, I think she was still Melanie. Anyway, she's, just looking for something to brighten up the storefront. And she teaches 3 bins, right? Of figurines. Yeah, that's it. As you know, Malati said. So I brought one back to Swamiji. And I was shocked that all of a sudden Swamiji makes pranams. Lord Jagannath has come. Were there more? Yeah, there were 2 more. So can you get, I don't know if Prabhupada knows that she shoplifted. We call it the 5-finger discount, Puts it in her handbag. So Lord Jagannath, the deities were, and these are the figurines, the prototypes. And so Swamiji says, do you know anyone who can carve this? Bigger forms of this? Oh yeah, Sam, he can do it. My boyfriend, he can do it. So call him. So Sam comes in. So you can carve, bigger, maybe 2-3 feet high figures. There they are on the image there. Oh, sure, I can do that. Shamsundar is such a talented person. So then he set to work carving. And then Prabhupada would periodically check on the work. And Shamsundar tells that one day Swamiji came in and noticed that his cigarettes were sitting on top of Lord Jagannath's head. He was still smoking. Right? So this is a great example of how Prabhupada knew how to teach according to time, place, and person. Prabhupada didn't say a word. He just takes his cane and goes and knocks the pack into the corner. So Sam gets the idea. Yeah, maybe it's not a good idea that I smoke while I'm doing this. Maybe I should, this is something sacred here. Okay. All right. Never mind that the carver's wife had shoplifted the figures, or that the carver himself wasn't yet following the principles of Krishna consciousness. Inclusive Prabhupada was inviting everyone to appreciate the deity in his unusual form as Jagannath, the Lord of the universe. And then one day after, Srila Prabhupada was at one day after the deities were installed, it was a bright sunny day, and so the devotees got the idea that they wanted to take Lord Jagannath out to Golden Gate Park. Prabhupada is at his apartment around the corner, but the devotees just thought, yeah, why not take him, so he can, chant with us. And so then Prabhupada, he went out to the park too, separately, just to see how the devotees were doing some kirtan. And then he saw Lord Jagannath out in the park. So, again, he just held his fire, he didn't say anything, but he sat down and was chanting, And then he got back to the temple and he told them, you don't do that. Once a year we have Radhadesh, and he told them about Radhadesh. So, so Prabhupada. And where else but in psychedelic San Francisco would people so easily accept Prabhupada's invitation to appreciate the deity form of the Lord and bow down before Lord Jagannath's large festive eyes. Prabhupada was thus able to slip deities past the modern iconoclasts, image breakers, people who say you cannot worship a graven image, like in the Old Testament. Not to speak of our Muslim friends. Past the modern iconoclasts and introduced them to Westerners. So when the hippies would come to the storefront, and then one day they saw these deities, there, Prabhupada had installed them. And then they asked the devotees, hey man, who's that? Oh, this is God. This is Lord Jagannath, the Supreme Personality of God, and his brother and sister. Far out. So then they saw the devotees, make Dandavat pranams. So they just did it too. They just bowed down. Far out. And they bowed down. So that's how Prabhupada introduced deity worship in the West. Where else but in psychedelic San Francisco could Prabhupada sneak deities under the radar past the gaze of the iconoclasts. All right. Now here's another phase, aspect of Gandhi's movement, and that it happened in different sequence in different parts of the world. So we're going to look at phase 3, initiation and congregation. In a 1949 letter to Indian Deputy Prime Minister Dr. Sardar Patel, this is Nehru's right-hand man. So Nehru was the first Prime Minister, and then Patel was his Deputy PM. Prabhupada wrote, so he's still trying to, lobby the government to honor Gandhi properly. This is in the Gita essay, actually. Quote, the third item is to take up the Harijan movement. This is Gandhi's movement, Harijan. The movement is, in the real sense, Prabhupada is spinning it like this, a spiritual initiation movement. Gandhi just wanted to stamp people as Harijan, it's true, we're all children of God. But here's what Prabhupada says, a spiritual initiation movement. And this should be organized in such a manner that people all over the world may take interest in it. Unquote. The quote, Harijan movement was Gandhi's attempt to allow everyone into the temples not just the higher castes, by declaring everyone a Harijan, quote, a person of God, unquote. That's true, Prabhupada noted, but in order for everyone to become fit to associate with the Lord, the Harijans must be initiated into a restorative path. So let's see how that looks. Oh, yeah. So there's initiation. There's Prabhupada years later. And now we're going to read, yes, restorative path. So who's going to read? Okay. Here we go. Yes.
Sanatana Goswami. Hare Krishna. Sanatana Goswami said that as bell metal can be turned to gold when mixed with mercury in a chemical process, so by the bona fide diksha or initiation method, anyone can become a Vaishnava. One should take initiation from a bona fide spiritual master coming into disciplic succession.
Yeah, that's from the Bhagavatam purport. So initiated devotees would gradually become the core of a wider congregation whose evolution would vary from country to country. So when we come in, we immediately start following what the devotees are doing in the morning program, chanting, classes. So it's an educational movement. And there's a young lady, a god sister, I don't know who that is. Anybody know? I think it must be New York. I recognize a godmother in the back of her. But okay. So initiated devotees would gradually become the core of a wider congregation whose evolution would vary from country to country. Now, here's what happened in India. It was different, because India is already a culture, a spiritual culture, although it's, as Prabhupada would say, hodgepodge Hindu. But still there's a sentiment for spiritual culture there. When Prabhupada brought his first Western disciples to India, for example, they were the talk of the nation. Why would materially successful Westerners give up everything to dance and sing Hare Krishna in the streets? Quote, you want to imitate Westerners? Prabhupada would chide his countrymen. Then imitate these Westerners. They are fed up with so-called modern civilization. Rather, let's see. Yes. Want to read?
The material advancement of the Western countries and the spiritual assets of India should combine for the elevation of all human society.
Anda Pangu Nyaya. Anda, the blind man, and the Pangu, the lame man, should combine. The lame person, in that case, in that context, was Indian, gets on the stout, strong, but blind Westerner, and then together they can do something. Anda Pangu Nyaya. Of course, it's changing today. That I mentioned about when I flew into Calcutta recently to Netaji Airport. The first thing I saw was a banner. I don't know, a couple of years ago, I think I saw this. Because India has developed more now materially. So the banner said, "Welcome to India. Feel the passion." And I thought, oh, come on! I came here to get away from that stuff. I want to feel the passion. I want to feel the sacredness of Mother India. Hear the sadhus. Or you see in the back of trucks, India is great. That means we can be as materialistic and, we can have Hollywood, we can do more than Hollywood. great as you. India is great. We can be more materialistic than the West. Concerned that Indians might come to see the Western devotees as mere performers, some observers were already dismissing them as, quote, spiritual hippies or even CIA spies. This came from the journalists. They became suspicious. Maybe the CIA is paying off Swamiji to bring these people into India to spy on us. Right? Because India is trying to be a neutral country in the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West. In India and the Soviet Union, they're pretty, they have this long-standing relationship. So they couldn't be. They must either be stoned on LSD or they're CIA spies. They were skeptical. So, and Prabhupada, he read this in the paper. So he temporarily suspended their street chanting and engaged them in a new program, life membership. So Prabhupada stopped the Yuga Dharma temporarily because there was suspicion. But Prabhupada himself enjoyed a good reputation, because Prabhupada himself had given his Bhagavatams to Shastri. We have the picture, Prabhupada presenting his Indian-produced Bhagavatams to the second Prime Minister of India, Lal Bahadur Shastri. And he was a cultured person, so he knew how to approach businessmen and government people. So Prabhupada said, now we're going to start a new program. He told his dancing white elephants, as he called the Westerners he brought over. I'm going to show you how to do life membership. So he brought them to big people in government and business. And Prabhupada, by his preaching, showed them how to approach these people, to become our first allies. Right, in India. For supporting Iskcon, well-established members would receive whatever publications and accommodations the society could offer them. Such respectable people would become Iskcon's first congregational members, as well as invaluable allies in the struggle to establish Prabhupada's movement in India. And it worked. In Bombay, Calcutta, in Delhi, they really helped us. Start especially, the whole Bombay thing, the whole thing with Mr. Nair, that Giriraj Maharaj documents, I'll build you a temple. If it wasn't for those allies, they couldn't have survived, the attempted demolition of Radha Bihari's makeshift abode there, dwelling. In the West, where people in general often regard Krishna consciousness as, quote, foreign, the congregation has taken more time to develop. Initially living and trained inside temples, Prabhupada's first Western followers have since spread out into the community, working and raising families to become congregational members themselves. The Indian diaspora, the spreading of the Indian community all over the world. The Indian diaspora and the rise of yoga culture worldwide have also helped turn Iskcon into a congregational movement. To move the Hare Krishna movement from the margin to the mainstream, Prabhupada identified a fourth phase his followers still need to embrace and develop. So phase 4. I just call it, at this point, a natural spiritual life, because this is how Prabhupada talked about it in the 40s, to that letter to Dr. Patel. In the same letter to Dr. Patel, Prabhupada wrote, quote, "The fourth item is to organize the much discussed caste system." This is what it's, that's got a bad name now, caste system. It means by birth, right? Not by quality and work. The much discussed caste system as a solution. Prabhupada doesn't shrink from that. He said, because Krishna identifies the castes in the Gita. Guna karma vibhagasha, not by janma. Chaturvanam maya system guna karma vibhagasha. So that's the real caste system, how we're typecast, as it were, by the laws of nature. The fourth item is to organize the much discussed caste system as a solution of the natural division of human beings all over the world. That's naturally how we differ from each other materially, by quality and work. Nationalistic division, Prabhupada is saying these national identities, this is artificial. Nation states. This is not really the real, how we really should recognize our differences. Nationalistic division of human races is artificial, but scientific division of the caste system by quality and work, as envisaged in the Bhagavad Gita, is natural. There's an old Gita painting in the Macmillan 1972 Gita. That's the Vedic. There's the Brahman, and you have the left corner, and there's the Kshatriya, and there's the sword, and there's the Vaishya with the bull, and there's the Shudra helping. He's the worker, helping the Vaishya do that. To show the world a better way to live, and then on the right, I'm showing the kind of rebranding, or what do you say, putting a new face on Varnashram. If you go, has anybody ever been to Gita Nagari? Yeah. So it's an eco, they call it Gita Nagari eco farm, eco village, and they're doing quite well. To show the world a better way to live, based on the Gita's teachings, is the final phase of Prabhupada's mission. As the body's different parts are equally appreciated for their contribution to the whole body's welfare, so the social body's different classes should be equally valued for their role in serving the Supreme Lord. High or low, head to toe, deep down, we're all God's servants. And here's a quote from the Gita Nagari essay. We came to call it the Gita Nagari prophecy because we were living in Gita Nagari, when I found this in the late 70s, and Satyam Maharaj was writing the Lilamrita. So Prabhupada, he starts talking about a community called Gita Nagari in the 40s. So he said, Prabhupada, he envisioned a whole community based on the Gita's teachings. Well, that's us. Years later, far out, right? Yeah, okay. Jai Prabhupada. So here's an excerpt from what we call the prophecy, but he called it Conception of the Gita Nagari Part 2. It's a very voluminous essay. Circa 1948. Quote, when the Gita Nagari will attempt to harmonize such sweet relation between man and God, man and the world and God, at such an auspicious time only, the United Nations' effort to establish peace in the world will be successful. For the dream of a caste-less society, of spiritual equality, all over the world will be realized in practice. He wrote that in 48. Now, in 1948, I was a 2-year-old. So, I remember in 1950, I was living in the Lower East Side with my parents. I was the oldest of 6 kids, and it was only me then. I was the first. So, my father would take me down to East River, to the docks, and we would look up the river where they were building the UN. Big glass edifice, right? And my father was saying to me, their son is the building that's going to end all the wars, no more wars. My father, he was in World War II, and my grandfather was in World War I. But this is it. No more wars. But as Prabhupada would always say in his preaching in the 70s, later on, simply they're increasing the flags. Everybody is just becoming their own country, and they're just staking out their own self-interest, nationalistic claims, and I mean, right now, one big reason that they can't have a ceasefire in the Middle East is because Russia keeps vetoing. Russia's a Security Council member, so there's different members, and the Security Council is becoming a little outdated. They got to update it, but yeah. So everybody's at each other's throats still, in the name of United Nations. Disunited, more and more disunited, more and more nationalistic flags. Okay. So Prabhupada is talking about, yes, this Gita Nagari. When he says Gita Nagari, he means the Hare Krishna movement. This is his first, as Prabhupada would say, in like a needle, out like a plow. So he was proposing that the Indian government, would finance this community, but this community was to be a community for spiritual revolution, to spread Sanatana Dharma, all over the world. But they didn't buy it, because they just wanted to make India great. India is great, meaning industrially. Because living the way Krishna lives, here's how I end the narrative. Because living the way Krishna lives, amid his land and cows, looks and feels very different from the way most of us live in the modern world. And because the first 3 phases of Prabhupada's mission are perhaps more easily adaptable to modernity, the cities. We have been slow to approach phase 4, whose Sanskrit name is Varnashram. Yet it is the timeless and natural spiritual life we in our modern world have been seeking and desperately need to recover. Okay, now before we look at the learning outcomes, I want to caution you that the next lesson is called his Varnashram Challenge. That's where we really discuss Varnashram. This lesson just brings us up to the threshold, the unfulfilled phase. So when you make your questions and comments, don't ask me anything about Varnashram. Save it for this afternoon, because everybody wants to talk about Varnashram. That's great, but please save it. Okay, so let's go to, and by the way, that is a picture of Gitanagari. I lived there for 12 years. It's a beautiful place. Lush Juniata Valley, very fertile farmland, Amish country. Okay, so here we go. Why don't we let's let the ladies at least read one. Okay. Learning outcomes. Oops. Go ahead.
His Iskcon branch learning outcomes. By now, we should be able to recall how the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi inspired first name Srila Prabhupada gave to his spiritual mission. Recall how Prabhupada tried to expand his mission in Jhansi. Explain how Iskcon, though but a branch of Lord Chaitanya's desire tree of devotional service, has the spiritual potency to transplant that tree worldwide. Based on Iskcon's 7 purposes, identify our society's main purpose. Identify the 4 phases of Iskcon's spiritual evolution. And explain why we have been slow to embrace the Varnashram phase of Iskcon's development.
Yeah, I might have to delete that, because I just hinted at that. So you're going to see that more in the next lesson. Okay, Prabhus, and before we do that, Stephen, Stoka Krishna Prabhu has reminded me that this is a great book published in 2014 by the GBC foundational document, Srila Prabhupada, the founder of Acharya Iskcon, the fruit of the Srila Prabhupada's Position Committee initiative of the strategic planning team. So it's available
BLS or online?
at BLS, or it's available online, or if you email me, I have it in PDF. Hey. So my email address, S-U-R-E, it's my name, S-U-R-E-S-V-A-R-A, Suresvara @gmail.com, and I'll be happy just to shoot you over a PDF copy of this book. It's a really good book.
You can also go to Vanapedia, they have it in 10 different languages.
Vanipedia, 10 different languages.
Oh, wow.
Did all you Vani people do that? Who translated it into 10 different languages? You folks did that? Gee. Okay,
We also translate in Dutch. It's also,
including Dutch.
yeah.
Okay, that's one of the 10. Okay. All right, good. Okay, any questions or comments? We do so much time, we have 20 minutes. Make a chakra Prabhu. Here we go. Never, no Varnashram.
Oh. I would love to follow, but I'm in Paris this afternoon, so
Okay.
I'm on the way.
You have to see his recording.
So, yeah, definitely. We'll try to follow online. So, just one additional comment when you were talking about the first Jagannath Baladev Subhadra's deities and the idea of having a Rath Yatra. His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was explaining that before the hippies joined the Hare Krishna movement, they would also love to dance on the streets, but then they were chased away by the police. So they found Swamiji, Prabhupada, they found him so cool because after they joined, they could also chant and dance, and now also the police came there to protect them instead of chase them away. So they found this really cool, this Swami. And now they could legally dance and chant under the protection of the police. So I found it very interesting.
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, we were, in '65, one of the biggest hit tunes in America was Dancing in the Streets. Martha and the Vandellas, Motown. But that was, they were a black girl group, so that was, they had civil rights overtones. Because Dancing in the Streets was foreshadowing of rioting in the streets. And we were also, white or black, we were also, you're right, dancing in the streets. And we were protesting. We were protesting the Vietnam War. And so many injustices from the military-industrial complex. So, and we were doing guerrilla theater. Guerrilla theater, ring a bell? We were, when I dropped out of university 3 times, just to, disappointed with university, but every time I drop out, I go looking for the revolution, in the 60s. And one time I went out to Berkeley, a year late, unfortunately, a year late, because Swamiji had already been there for the Summer of Love the year before. By then it had turned into the year round of hate and hard drugs. And anyway, so I took a course in Berkeley at the Free U, this University of California, Berkeley. Then there was a Free U, a Free University. People, because that was the ethic, free, everything should be free, right? So I took a course on guerrilla theater, how to make a spontaneous play in the street, which would freak out the straight people, which would challenge their values. And I took this back to University of Connecticut, where I went. And we would do that, protesting the war. We would go in front of the reserve officer training corps place where they were training people, to be officers to go fight in Vietnam. We would do, freak out plays of massacres that were going on in Vietnam at the hands of the Americans. So it was a pretty easy rollover from dancing in the streets and guerrilla theater to joining Iskcon, because again, we would go out on the Hare Krsna parties, and at night, we would go out at night, and as I said, the theater district, or just Boston Commons, Cambridge Commons, and we were such a powerful, especially when the whole temple went out, all 50 of us went out, and then we'd sweep up all these other demonstrations in our wake. We'd sweep up, the women's liberation and the black liberation and the anti-war movements, protests, and they all joined us because we had more energy. They could see we were happy and they were just angry, Yeah. Democratic Convention, 1972. Richard Nixon, Democratic Convention, an anti-war candidate was running for president against Nixon. So it was the primary actually down in Miami. And there was the protest, there was a convention going on in the Miami Convention Center. And then there were protesters outside. By then everybody was against the war. Even the media and everybody was against it. So all these protesters were outside the convention. And then it was getting dark. And then we were doing, I wasn't there, but the devotees were doing Harinam all day. And then night fell. And then protesters were planning an all-out assault on the convention center. But the National Guard was there, the troops. They called out the National Guard to protect the people in the convention center, from the protesters. So the devotees didn't know this. So they were sort of snake dancing around the convention center, and then they got to a certain part and they could sense some heavy energy was going on. Because it was just like Kurukshetra. On one side was, the National Guard with their billy clubs and their gas masks and their helmets, riot gear. And the other side was the protesters, the students and all these people. And so then the media knew that. The media knew this is great theater. They don't care that it's going to be violent. They want eyeballs on their media, their television, whatever. So all of a sudden, the TV lights go on. And it revealed on one side, armed to the teeth, National Guard, on the other side, the protest, and they're about to go at it, And so the devotees saw, they were right in the middle. They were right in the crossfire. They were right there. And so they spontaneously, out of ecstasy and out of fear, Amarendra Prabhu tells later, because he was there, they just leaped up in the air. And they started doing Harinam. And they were already doing, they increased it. Haribo! That went wild. It just went crazy on the drums. And it neutralized the whole thing. And the protesters were mad because they wanted war, And the cops loved it. They thought, you realize you guys have saved this whole. There would have been so much bloodshed except for you guys. Thank you so much. So Harinam Sankirtan, changing the atmosphere very dramatically. Okay. Prabhu.
So there is one slide you showed about Diksha.
The girl being initiated?
That's a quote from the Hari Bhakti Vilas.
Oh, yeah.
Turning bell metal into gold. So here it seems that there is a lot of emphasis on Diksha. Could you elaborate that?
Yeah, it's important.
But more emphasis should be on Shiksha.
Well, the Shiksha is the essence of Diksha. I mean, the only reason she's getting it is because she's been recommended by the temple president as knowing, as getting it, understanding, going to the classes, and cooperating with the devotees, and so now it's just the ceremony is confirming what's already taken place. I mean, if it hasn't already, if the change in the heart hasn't happened already, then it is a sham. If it's just like, I'm just going through the motions and now I got my guru and I got a new name, hey, I'm cool. That's silly. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta agreed to initiate Acharya Day because he was keen to hear. And so you have to become keen to hear too. Yeah.
Because here it says in the quote, one should take initiation from a bona fide spiritual master.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, but
to be connected to the discipline succession.
Right. But take initiation it doesn't just mean the ceremony. Initiation is a whole process. It's ongoing. Right? Take initiation. It's not just the moment, It's like, it's almost like, like, not real Christians, but show-about Christians, the evangelical, do they have these in Belgium? TV evangelists and stuff? Yeah, big. Right, in America it was a big business. It's kind of discredited now because a lot of these guys have been exposed as being debauchers and fraudsters and whatever. But you could turn the TV on and see the televangelist saying, "Now all you out there in TV land, I want you to put your hand on it." See, they'd have a person up there who needed healing, right? They were crippled or something. So I'm going to put my hands on the laying on of hands. I'm going to put my hands in the name of Jesus, put my hands on the person's head. And if you out there in TV and put your hand on the TV set and say, "Heal, heal," it's some spectacle, right? So real initiation. I mean, okay, I'm initiated. Right, for 53 years. But I'm still trying to fulfill those vows in a deep way. I mean, it's no intoxication, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling. But there's depth to that. I'm still intoxicated by the bodily concept of life, I hate to admit. I still, I'm still trying to understand what chastity really is. Thomas Aquinas, he famously said, perhaps parodying a show-bottle Christian, "Oh Lord, please give me chastity, but not just yet." Right? That's a little too much, Gambling. I mean, meat eating, that's the easiest one maybe, because prasad was so good. But gambling, am I gambling my time when I'm dividing my time between Krishna and something else? It's not that I can't really say, well, this is related to Krishna Prabhu. I'm chanting my rounds and I'm watching the Super Bowl, Prabhu. Now, I'm chanting my rounds, so don't criticize me, but I'm really absorbed in, the Chiefs against the Patriots or whatever. I don't know what you have here, it's football and it's soccer, right? That's what you guys. So anybody who's chanting their rounds while watching the World Cup, it seriously needs to increase the depth of there. It's being inattentive while chanting. It's committing there's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses. So sometimes we build the offense right in our chanting, just like there was a funny video that came up, I think it was produced by Desire Tree. It was an Indian video, and it showed the different ways that you shouldn't chant your rounds. And there was girls chanting their rounds, while they were scrolling on their phone, and somebody chanting their rounds while he's hot riding on his motorcycle, you know, because there's so many motorcycles. And there's people chanting around, what's this, others. Do you remember this video? It's a funny video. It's how not to chant your rounds. So I'm still trying to fulfill those initiation vows in an anyavilashita shunyam, you know, pure devotional way. Yeah. So it's a process. And it takes a whole, at least with me, you know, it takes a whole life. Before giving up this present body, Krishna says in the Gita, Shapnoti Hayaya Praksharira Vimokshana Sharira Vimokshana. Before giving up this present body, Gita 5:23, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the forces of desire and anger, he is a yogi and is happy in this world. Before giving up this present body. Okay, I'm counting on, I know Prabhupada can do it before. Okay, Prabhupada's mercy that I can surrender to Prabhupada. I'm in the home stretch now. 78? Hey, give it up, Suresvara, come on. Okay, it's a process. That's the answer. Okay, 907. Let's give a chance. Any lady questions, comments? Okay. What question?
So one part of the presentation there was the BTG, back to Ghana,
Okay.
and showing how Prabhupada through his disciples actually revived
Yes.
the back to Ghana in the West.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what Prabhupada's desire and mood would be, because I see that, of course, naturally, even in Prabhupada's time, the books took over in terms of distribution and presenting Krishna consciousness. But we still have back to God, and I think we should. But at least here, this part of the world, I don't really see it as a means of preaching. It seems to be more of an insider presentation. I'm not sure, because personally I don't read most of the BDGs that come out. But I don't know how much they're adjusted to new people to preaching, or is it for devotees? And I'm just wondering if it would not be a really powerful tool, because as much as we should distribute books, we should lessen that. Many people will take books but won't read them, but it seems with a magazine you can more easily make relevant articles to current situations and give a Krishna conscious spiritual perspective, and people like to read news, like to know what's happening. Whereas with the books, of course the books are kind of set in stone, and they'll speak on these topics but not exactly on what's happening today. So I'm just wondering, would Prabhupada want us to use that more as a tool of preaching and have really articles on current problems and current situations in the world and how we should see it from a spiritual perspective, and then distribute them?
Yeah, it's a good question. And in 1969, Prabhupada was in Boston at Iskcon Press, where they were producing Back to Godhead. And they had a meeting. I think it's the only meeting. I mean, Prabhupada would say this and that in different letters, but the only meeting specifically about Prabhupada's desires for Back to Godhead. And I'm not recalling, I mean, it was, see, at that time, the book distribution hadn't really taken off yet, because there weren't many books. It was TLC and Gita, but we hadn't really figured it out. We were kind of intimidated, but magazines we could relate to. So Prabhupada, so at that point, it was that's how we reach people. Now there's a plethora, there's an abundance of ways we are reaching people. I don't know if they're still doing it, but out of Alachua, at least the North American BTG editorial offices still are. They started another magazine. What was it called? Spirit, Not This Body, or something. It was more attuned for university people, which is Prabhupada loved. Prabhupada would say one university one student is worth 100 men on the street, because they're becoming educated. They could be influencers. And then there's the whole phenomenon also in the West of the Hinduization of Iskcon. Where because of the Indian diaspora, Indians going all over the world, starting with Prabhupada. Prabhupada came in 65 because the Immigration and Naturalization Service in the West, they relaxed the immigration laws. They weren't letting Asians in America because the Japanese had been our enemies in World War II. So just when Prabhupada came, just before that, by Krishna's arrangement, Asians were allowed in. So, and then more and more Indians started coming to the West, and then when the 80s happened, and so many people, some of them, my godbrothers and godsisters, took a little distance from Iskcon because of what was going on in terms of invitation to Prabhupada's position, and so many fall downs and betrayals and blah blah blah. The Indians saved the temples. They actually came in and took them over because they were established professionals by then, and they took them over. So all glorious. But still, Prabhupada's measure of a successful yatra was how you're reaching the locals. Of course, many Indians have become the locals, right? But still, how you're reaching. I'm just talking my context, America. How are you reaching, the many generation Americans as opposed to you? So it's kind of a complex question. And Prabhupada, he wasn't, what worked in one time in one way. He wasn't just. He was flexible, so he'd be willing to adapt as the times changed. So I guess you just have to see locally what's like here in Radhadesh. What do you have? What do you have back to guide in Belgium?
Some of the members they receive back to guide.
English back to God.
It's in English, yeah. It's not. You don't produce it in Netherlands or.
Krishna Bhakti magazine.
Krishna Bhakti
Krishna Bhakti
magazine.
magazine is supposed to be.
When was that last? When was the last?
So you have to see what you have to work with and what's effective. And like even the Gita, which is our basic book, the BBT produced that Prabhupada's introduction to the Gita, as just an introduction to the Gita. I mean, it's in the Gita, but they might be open the Gita and see Devanagari and Sanskrit and all these names they can't relate to, and they might just put it aside. But then this little booklet is more accessible to people. So whatever increases the book distribution and the follow-up, people actually becoming interested, you have to judge by the result. That's Prabhupada's way. Palena, Paratita Day, judge a thing by its result. Okay. So when you come this afternoon, you're very patient, you can bring all your varna, because we're going to take a real close look at, let's look at the transition here. Go ahead. No, I don't have it for this one. But these lessons kind of go together, because this lesson kind of brought us right up to the threshold, and now we're going to take a look at his Varnashram challenge. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.